the passion of the entrepreneur is really critical in my mind. And I think, conveying the belief that, this isn't something you're just trying for now and hopefully can attract some money. And if you don't, you'll dive into something else, the next week, that this is something that you heart and soul believe. A big thing I look at is, what kind of personal sacrifice are they willing to make to believe in this idea, and always get scared off by someone that's got a brand new company and is trying to model it out to pay themselves, $10,000 or $15,000 a month to run it. I mean, that's not how you bootstrap it. Right.
Yeah.
And then, I think what's really critical is the pathway, and that they have a clear understanding of the pathway. Sometimes I meet with entrepreneurs that have a really good idea and maybe good technology, but they, when you say like, okay, what's the application? It's like, well, it can be this, it can be this, it can be this, it can be this. And that's true, but you've got to have a plan to get from point A to point B, right? You can't just kind of do this kind of all things to all people, because you can't be afraid of failure. And I see that sometimes where it's like people want to hang on so badly to an idea or a business because they don't want to admit, whether it's to themselves or to other people, that it failed, that it wasn't either the right idea or the right time, or it can fail for lots of reasons. And failure is okay. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of successful companies, but I've also been involved in companies that failed. And it is a hard balance, because you do want to put everything into it, and you want to, you don't want to quit. But sometimes it reaches a point where you just say, there's not a viable pathway forward, and my time, energy, talents, money is better spent somewhere else, where we can accomplish something different. And I think that's a hard thing, especially if it is something you believe passionately about, or, is your baby, if you will, to kind of accept the failure and move on. But I think you'll talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that will talk about how much more they have learned in failure than they've learned in success.
That's very true.
It's pretty, it's pretty unrealistic to just say everything you're ever going to go out and do and create is going to be successful. So you're going to have those failures along the way. I'm the youngest of four in my family, and actually 7 years younger than my next closest sibling. So, when I was little, I still had siblings in the home, but for a lot of my life, I was the only one at home. And, definitely tried to have dinner as a family, together every night. My dad was in the used car business, and so he, was a hard worker. I grew up thinking you worked kind of early to late, Monday through Saturday, because that's what my dad did. Otherwise, I think it was probably traditional for that time of we tried to kind of all sit down together and kind of talk about the day's events. And I was definitely always interested in kind of hearing about, my dad's business. He was self-employed, and kind of saw firsthand, even as a kid, kind of the ups and downs of being a small business owner, and the good things and the challenges around that. So that's a lot of what I have memories of from that time.
Yeah. So you grew up very, very young, being around an entrepreneurial mindset, and that did you grow up starting any of your own little businesses, selling candy or anything like that on the side?
Yeah, definitely not. Candy would probably have been better. I mean, I was always kind of entrepreneurial and looking for different things. I think the statute of limitations is passed, so I can say that when I was in high school, I actually was essentially like a bookie. Like I was I was like taking bets from my friends on sports games. And so I did that when I was in high school, and then also, growing up at that time was really the heyday of baseball cards. And so that was kind of like the stock market for a kid, did a lot of collecting and buying and selling, and just kind of that thrill of, you know, you buy a pack of cards for $1 and you find a $25 card in there. That was, you know, at one time was kind of my plan for being super wealthy one day, was all these baseball cards.
I did the exact same thing. I had Beckett's, you know,
Oh
stacked
yeah.
up all over the place, and yeah, those are great times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you went to college. Talk a little bit about what you did in college, what you're studying in college, and that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from Boise State, from the business school, and got a business degree. And I think that, you know, my college experience was, you know, the best thing for me, which was I was working full time through college. I kind of didn't really have the patience, I think, to you know, kind of sit on the entrepreneurial sidelines for a few years and study, you know, just study in school. So I kind of did both. And when I look back on it, I mean, you know, I feel like they were equally valuable, you know, kind of the things that I learned in college, as well as just the things I learned, you know, kind of in the workplace and out kind of starting to try and do my own things. So I worked full time from start to finish, but I did a business degree, and then you know, I used to kind of feel like I wanted to get an MBA at some point, and then I got too deeply involved in in work and starting things and doing things, and just felt like I was getting the street smarts MBA, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, in my opinion, is probably better than, you know, sitting behind a desk. So
I agree.
no, that's fantastic. So talk a little bit about some of the first your first companies that you started. What were you doing? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned my dad was in the used car business, and that's what he did from the time he was a kid, you know, through his whole life. But when I was about 12 years old, he was kind of looking for something different, and he bought a franchise for a licensed sports store. So it's called Pro Image Sports, and sell, you know, NBA, NFL jerseys, T-shirts, hats, things like that. And so he thought this would be kind of a good side investment business. So he bought a single franchise. And the great thing about that, you know, he opened the store here in Boise. And so I grew up, you know, working in that store when I was 12 years old. In fact, I worked shifts by myself, and it was funny because people would come in and they'd kind of look around to try and figure out who was working. And I'd say, can I help you with something? And this was before, you know, computers with you know, I was figuring out the change in my head and counting out change and stuff. And so that was a great experience. And then also started to learn different aspects of the business. When I was in high school, I was doing the payroll, you know, for the business. And so I got a lot of good experience that way. And then while I was going to college, I was, you know, working in that same business, and really liked all the different components. You know, it's the great thing about a small business is you are the HR guy, you are the accounts payable guy, you're all of these things. And so I really liked that. And so my dad had never wanted to go beyond one store because he was busy with the car business. But I went to him and said, you know, let's expand this. I think there's some opportunity, and I can do it. And so that was really the first thing that I set out and did kind of in my early 20s as I was going to school. And I had saved some money. My dad made me kind of put all the money I had saved into it. And then also, you know, we worked out kind of a sweat equity plan. And then over time, you know, I bought more of the business, and we expanded to, you know, multiple locations and into a couple states. And that was, you know, a great learning experience, because again, just those ups and downs of being a small business owner. And, you know, there were times when it was great, and there were times when you kind of laid in bed at night, worried about were you going to be able to make payroll and pay vendors and that type of thing. And as you know, as a business owner, you get paid last, and sometimes that works out well, and sometimes it doesn't work out at all.
Exactly.
And so that was great. So then, in later years, as I got involved in a bunch of other different things, that experience really provided me a great kind of baseline of understanding of, what it's like to just kind of start things from the ground up.
Yeah, you're in an interesting situation. I haven't talked to very many people that do what you do today that have grown up with that much experience. So that's fantastic. So you mentioned before that you have been involved in a number of different types of companies, and I've seen your LinkedIn profile, some of the different things that you've done. What were some of the standout companies or standout things that you would say you sort of took your business experience to another level?
Yeah, so not a traditional pathway, I think, because I was doing the retail stores and we built those up and we're having success. And then I always had been really interested in politics, really kind of observing politics, even as a kid. I mean, I used to watch the presidential debates and just was really interested in the kind of the strategy and sport of it. And so I started kind of getting involved in, politics on kind of the fundraising side.
Mm.
And what I didn't know when I got into that is it really opened up a big network of people. And so I started kind of through those experiences, started being in the room with people that I would never be able to go get a meeting with or get on the phone with, but suddenly I'm in the same room and we're kind of on the same team as it relates to like a presidential candidate. And so they kind of just accepted me as a peer, and it was a great learning experience in the sense that no one asked me what college I went to. If I went to Harvard or something, no one asked to see a copy of my bank statement. They just kind of accepted me as a peer because I was kind of in the same room with them. And that was a pretty key moment because it kind of made me raise kind of the vision of what was possible to go out and build or create or partner or whatever it is. Because, up until that time, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe it's all kind of rigged. And if you don't, if you didn't grow up in New York and go to Harvard and have these, key relationships with people on Wall Street, that you couldn't, go get involved in venture capital or private equity or these types of things. And it was a great learning experience to realize how critical just relationships are and building relationships, and people like to do business with people they have relationships with, and you can build those relationships a lot of different ways. So that was a pretty key thing that kind of expanded my vision and horizons, and then from there it just seemed like there was a lot of possibilities and opportunities.
So would you say that that's sort of the platform that you used, or the foundation that you used to establish a lot of the relationships which have led you into this?
Yeah, it definitely was at that time, because when you get into kind of say presidential political fundraising, a lot of those people are they're high net worth successful individuals, and because they have the network to then go fundraise, and they want those political relationships for business purposes or whatever else. And so I think there's a lot of different paths to kind of network and get in with people, but that's kind of what worked for me. And then once I started to have some of those relationships, it was like a domino effect, because that just led to other relationships. And one thing I've always focused on is building relationships, even not knowing if anything would come from it other than just a relationship. If nothing else, there's going to be learning. There's going to be experience. I mean, I love just kind of learning from other people and what they have been through and accomplished and seen, and people a lot of times like to share that type of thing. But I think sometimes people get caught up in, I don't really see a end game for that relationship, so I'm not going to spend time on it. And that's been a big thing for me, is always building relationships, even if there's no real reason to do it. And then a lot of times those yield mutually beneficial fruit 5 or 10 years later. And that's been kind of a cool thing to see too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you have this base now, all of these different connections, and obviously you have an interest in entrepreneurialism and business. You melded the two together and started doing accelerators or seed fund type funding. What was the inspiration for that? Did you have any types of companies maybe that you were working with at the time that were looking for investment, or was there a reason for it, or was it just because you were interested in getting involved in VC funding?
Yeah, so I think that it was a little bit of both. I mean, I did have a couple people that I knew that were kind of trying to build startups, and the funding infrastructure in Boise at that time, I mean, it was just really difficult for them to go out and raise money. And I kind of realized that there was a lot of good ideas and there was good people that could go out and execute them, but the funding was a problem. And if they did get the funding, a lot of times it required them to move out of Boise. And, as a longtime Boise guy that cares about the Boise, economy and infrastructure, I didn't like that. Okay, when we really do have some of these good ideas, they're moving to Silicon Valley or they're moving to Seattle or wherever. So that was definitely, part of what spurred it. And then, obviously I love entrepreneurship. I love starting things myself, but I also just love being around other entrepreneurs. And when I can sit down with someone across the table and see that passion and excitement and that they're willing to bleed in the streets for their idea, that's inspiring to me. And if I can be helpful to them, that's awesome. If I can, help them along the way. And then, some of these are really cool ideas that I believe in and feel like can be, get great returns. But it's really like how we look at things is we always talk about, we invest in people. And it's, to me, always about the people, the entrepreneur, and do I believe in that person? And, if I do, then that's a big part of it, even more so than the idea or the project.
I love that. Yeah, that's I completely agree. I mean, it's all about the team and bringing it all together. So no, that's great. Can you talk a little bit about if someone is looking for VC funding, what are some of the things that they can do? And it sounds like you pretty well invest in early stage type startups. So at an early stage, what are some of the things that they can do to stand out, from the rest of the crowd, or really, create a great presentation? Obviously, you said that the people involved, that's a huge portion of this. But what else can they do to stand out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the passion of the entrepreneur is really critical in my mind. And I think, conveying the belief that, this isn't something you're just trying for now and hopefully can attract some money. And if you don't, you'll dive into something else, the next week, that this is something that you heart and soul believe. A big thing I look at is, what kind of personal sacrifice are they willing to make to believe in this idea? And always get scared off by someone that's got a brand new company and is trying to model it out to pay themselves, $10,000 or $15,000 a month to run it. I mean, that's not how you bootstrap it, right?
Yeah.
And then I think what's really critical is the pathway, and that they have a clear understanding of the pathway. Sometimes I meet with entrepreneurs that have a really good idea and maybe good technology, but they, when you say like, okay, what's the application? It's like, well, it can be this, it can be this, it can be this, it can be this. And that's true, but you've got to have a plan to get from point A to point B, right? You can't just kind of do this kind of all things to all people and see what sticks, because I think it's really hard to be successful if you're doing that. So I think those are some of the key things. And then, it's hard. It can be really hard to go out and raise money. And I think the other thing when I'm looking at these early stage companies is if there's got to be a pathway for success that doesn't just involve the CEO or the entrepreneur just spending all their time raising money, right? It's like we've got to, it's got to be an amount of money that is realistic to go raise, and then is going to be able to yield something that will make the next round of money come in. And I see sometimes entrepreneurs that they're kind of in this perpetual seed rounds that can go on for 4 or 5 years because they're just raising money just to get them, another 3 months down the tracks. And it's tough. I think it's tough to ever kind of get out of that cycle and ever attract that larger capital because, they start to look at, well, you've been at this 4 years and you're still at this point. There must be something wrong with that. So I think that's a key thing too, is like, hey, can we get the amount of money you need now to then go accomplish something, whether it's, ARR or whatever it is, to then attract that next round of funding. I had a VC tell me once that, whenever they write a check, they make sure in their mind they know who's writing the next check, right? And I think that's a critical part of it.
Yeah. So I guess sort of the harsh reality to entrepreneurialism is knowing when to give up too, when to abandon an idea or pivot or whatever you want to call it. Do you have any advice on what you've seen people go through, and any advice on, hey, maybe we should stop positioning this in this way and maybe move over here? Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I think the advice I would have is you can't be afraid of failure. And I see that sometimes where it's like people want to hang on so badly to an idea or a business because they don't want to admit, whether it's to themselves or to other people, that it failed, that it wasn't either the right idea or the right time, or it can fail for lots of reasons. And failure is okay. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of successful companies, but I've also been involved in companies that failed. And it is a hard balance because you do want to put everything into it, and you want to, you don't want to quit. But sometimes it reaches a point where you just say, there's not a viable pathway forward, and my time, energy, talents, money is better spent somewhere else, where we can accomplish something different. And I think that's a hard thing, especially if it is something you believe passionately about, or, is your baby, if you will, to kind of accept the failure and move on. But I think you'll talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that will talk about how much more they have learned in failure than they've learned in success.
That's very true.
It's pretty, it's pretty unrealistic to just say everything you're ever going to go out and do and create is going to be successful. So you're going to have those failures along the way.
And what types of companies do you guys typically work with? And it sounds like you might do technology side of things, and also real estate as well. Talk a little bit about those different types of companies.
Sure. So again, we're kind of a little non-traditional because we want to do things that we think are fun, and projects that are fun, and people that we believe in. And so we do, typical kind of early stage venture. We do more traditional private equity stuff, and then we do real estate development. But, I think when it comes to technology, we're really looking for those ideas that are, can really be disruptive to kind of what's going on, and really kind of accelerate, in the market. And, ideas where there is a really large kind of total addressable, market out there. And, I don't know. I mean, I remember thinking a number of years ago, like, all the good ideas are gone, right? When kind of the initial big kind of tech wave happened and all these things happened, I was like, man, all the good ideas are gone. But it just, I mean, that's so much not true. And every day, I see and hear about new things. I'm like, that's amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously as things are changing and with the recent, events with the pandemic, we've seen even more how critical technology is,
Mm-hmm.
how consumer behavior can change or is
Mm-hmm.
forced to change. And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of things out there that can really be improved, changed, disrupted through technology. And those are the types of things that we're looking for. And we don't, some people stay very, we're only doing medical, or we're only doing, fintech, we're only doing this or that. We don't really try and put things in a box like that. We're looking for, again, great entrepreneurs with great ideas and a great vision, and that can be in a lot of different spaces.
I love it. So is this hardware, software, pretty well anything that technology focused you guys would take a look at?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, a lot of software would be primary, but we're also involved in some hardware type stuff, and then even stuff that's really a hybrid of technology and logistics or
Mm-hmm.
operations. I mean, one business that we're excited about that we're involved in is around food delivery, and that's, there's a very brick and mortar and logistics component to it,
Mm-hmm.
but the solution is very much software driven, and so it's a great hybrid of kind of a old world and new world,
That's cool.
economy.
That's great. That's great. And how about on the real estate side of things? You mentioned that you get involved in some developments. Talk a little bit about what that side looks like for you.
Yeah, so with that, really just focused here in our home market. Boise is growing a ton, and because I've born and raised here and lived here my whole life, I mean, I feel like I've got a great sense for the area and the market. And so, we look at different commercial real estate, as well as multifamily,
Mm-hmm.
some of that type of stuff in the area, because we're super bullish on Boise. And then sometimes there's a way to combine, kind of the buckets, because sometimes we're involved in a real estate development opportunity with one of the tech startups, where, they need space, or they need some kind of commercial building or something, and we can be involved in both sides of that, because we believe in what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because we've invested in it, and so then we can kind of be their real estate partner as well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. How do you typically have people? Do people reach out to you, or do you have some type of a process where you um, find these companies that are looking for investment? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of all the above. I mean, we'll have, I'll have people that'll just reach out to me on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I'll read what they send over, because you just never know, right? And I've
Mm-hmm.
I've done, meetings and calls and things just based on kind of that cold call. A lot of it though is just through networking, and there's other people. What's interesting is, I think, especially in kind of the early stage venture space, it's not always this really competitive thing of like, oh, hey, we want to hurry and get this to keep somebody else that also invests out. Like, we would love someone else to be involved, because that
Mm-hmm.
just means more money coming in and more potential money for the next round, and everything. So, we will coordinate with other people, other investors who, either family office type
Mm-hmm.
investors, or more of a structured fund. And hey, have you met these guys yet? Have you heard of these guys? And we like to, kind of coordinate, with them. And that's really helpful when we do that.
No, I love it. I love it. So you kind of touched on it very briefly, but if someone wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, talk about some investments, or learn more about your companies, what would you say is the best way to accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, they can send me a message on LinkedIn, or they can, our website's capital11.com, and the 11 spelled out, and they can go there and contact us. And like I said, I mean, you never know. I was just talking to someone yesterday from a family office who was here. It's from a family office actually out in Florida, but they were here in Boise looking at a deal that we're involved with. And I said, how did you connect with these guys? Because this is a Boise-based company, and these guys are out in Florida. And it was the craziest story where this guy was having a big event at his home, and the caterer of the event was in the kitchen talking to someone else about this Boise startup, because
Wow.
one of his friends is one of the co-founders of the startup. And so just this weird, even this guy clear in Florida knew about it and was talking about it. The guy of the family office, the high net worth guy, walks in the kitchen to get a glass of wine, overhears the conversation, starts asking questions, and then says, can you connect me with
Wow.
those guys? I'm really interested. And then they were out in Boise yesterday
Love it.
doing due diligence. So you just never know. And one thing he told me, which I really liked, is he said, you just always got to keep your ears open. He said, I invested in a company once because I overheard a conversation on an airplane of two people talking about something. And so, we're always kind of keeping our ears open and networking and talking to people, and you kind of never know. And I think it's a good lesson for entrepreneurs too, is you just never know, who you're talking to, or who you may get introduced to or whatever. And so you gotta always kind of have that elevator pitch ready, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep. Always. Yeah. Always be talking about what you're working on. So no, I love it. I love it. Travis, this is fantastic. I'd love to be able to maybe have you on the show again in the future sometime, maybe even bring in some of the companies that you're involved with. That'd be a fun conversation, being able to talk about some of the ins and outs with with some of your clients even. So, but no, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And I think your idea of this podcast is super cool. So I enjoyed listening to some of the episodes, and I think it's a great thing that you're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to be on.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.